What's up guys, Damon here. So I'm making this video on a topic that has been much requested, and that is hub motors versus mid-drives for DIY e-bike commuting. And I just want to preface by saying that this is my perspective and I'm not necessarily right, but I do feel I have enough experience to at least weigh in on the topic. And I live in a city that is probably a good example to show in terms of capability of hub motors in particular, because that's what I use. So, I mean, in short, if you don't want to watch the full video, if you want to know my perspective, hub motors versus mid-drives for e-bike DIY commuting, hub motor hands down. That is definitely contradictory to many people on the internet, and I think that you should just do your own research, but I only provide information, and if you find that helpful, then awesome. Of course, if you've bought a mid-drive or you own a mid-drive, I'm not saying that you should sell your mid-drive and buy a hub motor. The points I'm going to make in this video, if anything, will just show why I consider hub motors to be more suited for DIY e-bike commuting than, say, mid-drives or production bikes even. So just an update, because it is relevant to the topic. My bike is basically the same if you've been watching my videos. 10,000 mile update video more or less covers everything that I have on my bike right now. The one thing I have changed since, I did do a little bit of like an overhaul. I was going to replace my whole drivetrain. I bought like a new bottom bracket and chain and freewheel. As I mentioned in an earlier video, or even more than one video, that I was planning on replacing my freewheel. And instead of sourcing in a really expensive, well, it's basically the freewheel that came on my motor kit. It's fairly cheap, but because of shipping and also because they only really sell in bulk, otherwise you're still paying a ton in shipping, and being that I don't need like 50 or like 200 freewheels, I opted to just go with a Shimano 6-speed instead of a 7-speed. I haven't switched out the shifter yet because the one that I received in the mail, even though it does say 6-speed, it's clearly a 7-speed twist shifter. But I just made it work. All I have to do, I just put it in 6th gear and I adjusted the rear derailleur, and that's just what I'm going to use until I get an actual 6-speed to switch it out. But the main reason why I did that and why it's relevant in this topic is because the tallest gear, which is the smallest gear, is a 14 tooth, and that's what was on the freewheel that came with my bike originally. So it's the same gearing, it's exactly the same feel to me. There's no difference. And being that I only use the top gear and maybe the gear down or 2 gears down, like 2 gears down would be like 10 to 12% grade or something like that. And I'm still just kind of standing up and pedaling and stuff like that. But even just dropping down 1 gear on, say, like a 6% grade is definitely enough. I want to apologize if I hear some motorcycle noise. My neighbor across the street has been working on his motorcycle all day. I don't care, so hopefully you guys don't care either. I'm certainly not going to stop recording because of a motorcycle. Everybody's good with whatever they're doing. I prefer silent electric motors, but to each their own. So let's get into the topic. I'm going to convince you why I think hub motors are better for commuting. And if you have a mid-drive, I'm not saying that you should sell it. I think mid-drives have their place, and I'll tell you why I feel they have their place and where they do. But basically, you have, let's go over your main options here. You have the main ones that I would say people who are looking into e-bikes that are not familiar with the DIY community, they recognize names like Bionics, Bosch, Yamaha. first of all, if you're building your bike, chances are you're not going to be able to use any of those three motors, three brands anyway, because they are highly specific, and most production bikes that do use those, they build them into their frames. And also they're like crazy expensive, like, you know, $1,000 for the kit or $1,700 or $2,200. And that's without battery, by the way. There's much cheaper options out there, and the ones that you're going to run into, for the most part, are going to be like your Bafang kits. So here's a list. This, of course, doesn't even include Bionics or Yamaha or Bosch. Actually, before I get into that, let me tell you what I think about the mid-drive systems produced by automotive companies such as Bosch and Yamaha. Just as they did with the automotive industry, I feel they're making things way more complicated than they need to be. If I were to say the pinnacle of the automotive technology ever was the Volkswagen Beetle, like 40 some odd years ago, right? Because parts were interchangeable, it was very simple to work on, very inexpensive, and they still produce parts today. You can still build a Bug like from ground up using aftermarket parts today, 50 years later. They still get like 40 miles to the gallon. I mean, it's the point is, I don't need my e-bike motor to sense my torque or cadence 1,000 times per second. I can just use a throttle, and it's at my disposal whenever I want. The more complicated you make a system, the less reliable it is. And we're talking about range and things like that. I get that they're trying to make things more efficient, so you have better range and whatever. That's great. My point is, though, is that battery technology is changing so quickly that any battery you buy is going to be obsolete within a few years anyway, which happens to be the lifespan of your battery. So it's actually great. As long as you buy a big enough battery to handle the range that you're going to have, then by the time the next thing comes along, it'll be suited to whatever you're going to do next. So my battery system is a 52 volt, 26 amp controller, and that roughly puts out about 1,300 watts. And I've got a 17.5 amp hour Panasonic, was it a PF, or I think it's a PF cell, but I get about 20 to 30 miles range, more or less. It really depends on how you ride. It depends on how fast you go, how many hills you encounter. There's really so many things involved in calculating range, and most companies, especially production bikes, they overstate that number. Also, you are always limited to 20 miles an hour if you buy a production bike. And that being said, let's first actually go to this guy who I think is actually kind of stupid and doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm going to use his website to highlight some things. So here he lists basically the pros and cons of mid drives versus hub drives. So you can see the first pro of a mid drive is greater torque, better hill climbs, right? Cons being more expensive. We'll get into that later. Cons for a hub drive being heavy and uneven weight distribution, especially front hub. Part of that I agree. Pros for mid drive, overall better performance. Don't agree. Cons, more wear and tear on drivetrain. Also on the motor kit, all the parts involved, really. Con for a hub drive says torque arm required, but then in parentheses says front hub. That's true. On a rear hub, especially a steel bike, you don't have to use a torque arm unless you're going super high powered. Super high powered motor. But again, we're talking about commuting bikes. We're not talking about crazy like downhill bikes, and that's why I'm going to get into more on that in terms of mid drives later. Pros for a mid-drive is low and centered weight distribution. Yeah, it's true. Cons, not many retrofit options. Mostly proprietary motors on complete e-bikes, and that's in a reference to what I was mentioning with the Bosch and Yamaha and Bionics motors, because that's true. Like you can't really retrofit. Although my point would be that you can go with like a Bafang. These are really like your only few options, which are the Bafang BBS 02 or the BBS HD, or a Cyclone motor. Everything else is kind of like maybe up and coming, like crowdfunded type of things, or experimental, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest that for a commuter, and I'll get to that later. Pros, all-wheel drive system. Well, that's if you put two motors on your bike, which you wouldn't. Issues with climbing steep terrain. Get into that later. I don't agree. Pros for a mid-drive, utilizes the gears, thus providing higher top speeds. That's not entirely correct. Pros for a hub motor, less strain on the drivetrain, limited top speed. Okay, so now that total nonsense is over, let me explain why that I think most of this is nonsense. So let me actually, this is a good point. This is a good time to go into, let's move this over. Okay, so this is my bike computer that I use. And we'll just go to this, which is kind of like a normal day. This is my normal commute from home to work, as you can see, okay? Pretty much all the way across Portland, all the way into the suburbs. It's pretty consistent. I choose different routes, but more or less this is the main route. So now we'll flip over to here. Let me get rid of speed, because that actually doesn't really matter. This is the elevation change that I do every single day. Every day. Okay. So that really tells you right there that hub motors are perfectly capable of going up hills. Like I don't ever shift, ever, on my commute, on my normal everyday commute. The only time I shift down is if I'm going up like a really steep mountain road. And that's just to make it easier on me. That's not because I have to, it's because I choose to, because I actually like to work more efficiently with my motor. And you can see the speed, my speed is normally pretty consistent. It depends if I'm plinking around, you can see average miles per hour, about 19. Here it's about 19. Let's go down here, about 20, 19, 18, 18. Right, pretty consistent. Here, we'll just for proof, we'll go down to this other one too. As you can see, same route, same elevation change, every day. No problem at all. Never overheats, not even close. And I run it at 1300 watts. That's just proof. Let's just put it that way. So where do mid-drives come in? If I were to say that hub drives are better for commuting, where would mid-drives come in? Because I did mention that in a comment in my video. The points that this fool makes are that, the evenly distributed weight on like a downhill single track or something like that. Yeah, it is probably going to matter, and that's totally their place. That's where you put a mid-drive system, When it comes to commuting on a regular, and I live in hilly Portland, Oregon, it doesn't affect me at all. I have panniers on the back. Sometimes I have my camera, I've got my laptop, I've got all my bike tools, I've got my bike lock, I got change of clothes. Sometimes I'm hauling gear because I'm a technician, and I still ride my bike like I'm riding downhill single track like all day long. Not crazy, just I'm not affected by the uneven weight distribution. But that being said, there's definitely ways to do that, right? If you're using a bike like mine, which is a Trek 820, right? I've got my hub motor in the back. My fork is actually kind of heavy because it springs, and it's a cheaper fork. It's pretty balanced, I mean, the battery being in the bag up here, it's higher than I would like. It doesn't affect me as much as you would think. If I were to, and I'm actually going to my next video is going to be building another bike for a friend. He said, what would you do if money was no option? It's like, well, it's kind of relative, right? Because e-bikes can get really expensive, but keeping them under like, $3,000, I'm basically kind of like guinea pigging him on some of the things that I would choose, new sine wave controller. It's a 40 amp controller, a 9-continent motor, basically the same motor as I have, just a couple upgrades. Supposed to be more efficient. I'd like to see that for myself before, I were to choose to do that. So he's going to have in my opinion, the, most up-to-date technology in terms of hub motors go. So let's go back to mid-drives. So this website kind of lists a whole bunch of mid-drive kits. It's interesting that they don't even list Bionics and Yamaha and stuff like that. But talking about the BBS HD, which is Bafang's 1,000-watt motor, BBS 02, I think is listed up here somewhere. Yeah, 750 watts. You can run it on. You can run it on 52 volts as well. Totally fine option. It's great. Not saying anything wrong with it. Here's your 1,000-watt version of that. I don't know about these guys. These seem experimental to me. Cyclone, that's another one that's pretty well known. You can go up to 3,000 watts there. Still, it's pretty big, pretty clunky. I don't know. A lot of these, again, are, I would never, ever have something like this on my commuter bike. I mean, not only does it attract a crazy amount of attention, it just looks super clunky and over-engineered, in my opinion. Same thing with these guys. So Stoke Monkey, this is going to be something that you would use for a cargo bike. I don't really think you would really need a cargo bike for commuting. I think maybe there's going to be companies that would use that for utility, like pizza delivery, maybe stuff like that. I don't consider that. This is, to me, even though this would be considered a mid-drive, I still consider this a hub motor because that's basically what it is. It's a hub motor that's mounted mid-drive. So that's really what you have. All the rest of these are experimental, and who really knows the reliability. I know the MXUS is another decent one. So let's get into the problems with these guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little quick clip from this video. This is kind of an analysis. Hopefully I don't get flagged. This, in my opinion, I am commenting on this. So let's just kind of listen to this, and I'll tell you why this matters.
Drive motor. It mounts here in your bottom bracket of your bicycle. It's great for converting a standard upright bike into an e-bike. Installed this for the customer a little bit ago. He brought it back for an unrelated issue, and as I went to put it in the stand, I noticed the whole motor was loose.
All right, that's enough. So the point of me showing this video is one, No Bad Cycles is actually in the town that I live. So good props to these guys. But you'll see that they actually had to, he was talking about the motor rocking back and forth. Okay, so that is a major complaint by many people that I know, and even the bikes that I installed Bafang motors onto, they talked about the same thing. And this is not the same piece that I used, but it's very similar. And it's basically like a stabilizer bar that prevents it from rocking. But I'm kind of, it's like this is like a 2-year-old video, and there's still, or I guess this is a year old. But there was another video I saw that was a couple years old. Bafang is quite aware that this is a problem, but yet they still ship the bikes with the mounting bracket that comes with it, and it's worthless. It's a huge problem, and it ends up rocking back and forth. It's just something else you have to mess with, especially when you're placing bottom bracket and all this other jazz, like it's already complicated, and it definitely takes a lot more time and kind of fitment and things like that. The other thing is, if you go over here, this is a website that one of my sources for parts was a Lunicycle. However, you can tell that they definitely are going mid-drive in terms of what they are generally selling now. And it's mainly because of, they're putting them onto like suspension bikes and everything else. And again, that's the bike that you would use a mid-drive system for. If you're going, downhill racing and stuff like that, that's what you do. But a lot of people complain about chain alignment, and so with the factory chainring that comes with the BBS02 and the BBS HD. So this is like one of the first things that people replace is the chainring. And this thing's $75. This is the most upgraded part for that kit, right? So now if you go here to mid-drive kits, okay, so you've got your 1,000-watt motor, okay, $679 just for the kit, okay, but then you tack on $75 for the chainring, okay, or if you go with the 750 watt, that's $500 plus $75, plus you have to buy the stabilizer bar, which I don't know where that was. Let's see, might be on here. See if they even list the stabilizer bar. Yeah, there we go. Stabilizer bar, $25. So you're talking another $100 on top of the $400 or $650 that you're already spending on a mid-drive kit. Okay. Whereas this is the exact kit that I have. Okay. Now it's up to $226.90. It's by this seller. This is the seller that I bought my kit from. And you can see there's my throttle, there's the cruise control, there's the useless PAS system and the janky freaking wiring and the rack that you can't even install because it has closed holes to where you would mount it to the wheel, and it doesn't fit. Like you have to cut those open to be able to use that. The bag's fine, but I'm not saying that the kit I use is perfect. What I'm saying is that for $200 and all the other useless nonsense that it comes with, you still get a really good hub motor that I've used for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles with a controller that puts out plenty of juice, and it comes with the cruise control and all that fun stuff. So we're at $226. Okay, so even at a BBS02 without any upgrades, I can still get 2 of these kits for the price of one mid-drive kit. Okay, so here's the other thing. So now here is a guy talking about the BBS HD, and he tears it down and kind of talks about that for a second.
All right, here we go. It's the BBS HD from Bafang. What a piece of crap.
That's probably enough. So basically, I'm not saying these motors are crap, but what he ends up complaining about in this video is that they're still using the nylon gears that they used in the BBS02. You got to take these apart. It's kind of a pain in the ass, especially to get to that nylon gear. Not to mention they're loud. But once those nylon gears go out, you do have to replace them. So the thing is, these when we're talking about commuting, we have to be mindful of the fact that we're trying to be more economical as well as more efficient, right? So if you're spending money replacing parts that are wearing out, right, then it's not as reliable as, say, like a direct drive hub motor where it's pretty much hardly any moving parts, and it's fairly reliable and fairly consistent. Not to mention quieter, and just the way it works, like using a throttle versus torque sensing or cadence sensing. Torque sensing and cadence sensing, if I were to make a choice, if you like, let's say you're just set on a mid drive and you're like, I'm gonna go mid drive, you can't tell me otherwise, get a torque sensing which you can also do, by the way, with hub motors. You can get a torque sensor, a torque sensing bottom bracket. But like PAS or pedal, the cadence sensing, like the one that came with my kit, it's totally useless, right? So let's go back to one other point that this fool makes, basically talking about utilizing the gears, thus higher top speeds. So what I'm going to say about that is you're only limited by your, regardless of motor you go, you're limited by your voltage and your amperage. Amperage of controller, voltage of the motor, battery capacity. Battery capacity, the reason why that matters is the more capacity you have, it's kind of like the less voltage sag you're going to have, so it's going to be a little bit more efficient for way climbing hills because you have kind of more juice to work with. But the thing about that is you can still use your gears with a hub motor. You pedaling takes strain off the motor, okay? So when you're climbing hills, if you pedal along with it, and it's not putting up much effort, I never ever sweat or anything like that, and I'm still like working with my motor, then the motor is not working as hard, so it's using less energy, okay? I actually choose to keep the gear ratio that I have, which is a 48 tooth in the front and top gear being 14 tooth in the back. Both 7-speed and 6-speed are the same in that regard. And I actually prefer to have my pedaling top out at like 25 miles an hour because yes, I can cruise faster than that using throttle only, but that's actually a good gauge for me to know how fast I'm going without having to pay attention to my speed, because I don't have my computer going. I mean, I have it going, but I don't pay attention to what it's doing. I'm usually like listening to music and just like enjoying my ride. But it's kind of a good gauge to know how fast I'm going, and if I'm going faster than 25 miles an hour, it's normally downhill, which I'm not using the throttle anyway. So people that are, they look into like the 52 teeth crank the chainring, there we go, trying to pedal faster. It's because their motors are limited, right? They're limited to a certain point, and they're trying to pedal to make the motor go faster. The motor kit that I use and the battery combination that I use, 52 volts, 26 amps, is 1300 watts. I can go up to like 36 miles an hour on flat ground, no problem at all. But I don't suggest going 36 miles an hour on your e-bike anyway, because we are sharing the road with other, cyclists, and if you've crashed going 30 miles an hour, that's it's not fun. So going back to the guy that I'm building the bike for, he said, "Oh yeah, I want to do burnouts," right? So that is a person that's never crashed going 30 miles an hour on an e-bike. So, and not to mention that burnouts on an e-bike, you're looking at thousands and thousands of dollars. So, and it's just not necessary. There's no reason to do burnouts on an e-bike if you're talking about a commuter vehicle. So lastly, the reason why I talk about economical and efficiency, it goes along with the same lines as like, if you, like when the gas prices went up here in America and everybody decided to like buy scooters and stuff, right? You wouldn't buy a Vespa scooter, which costs like 15 grand to commute with, to save money, right? Because those things are only like rated for like 13,000 miles or something like that. And even like the cheap Chinese, I forget the motors that they always use. I had one too. I don't remember now. They all use the same motor basically. They're all rated for the same thing. So I guess my point is like the same thing with like a Tesla. You're not going to buy a Tesla to save money, right? Yes, it's more eco-friendly, but the amount of time it would take you to recoup gas expenses from buying a $50,000 Tesla, I mean, that's like 30 years from now, you know what I mean? Same thing with like, buying like a Vespa scooter, $15,000 to go 13,000 miles isn't going, you're never going to recoup your expenses in gas alone. Now, an e-bike like mine, I have about, I mean, this is including panniers and rack and everything else, like all the crap on my bike. It's like $2,200. That's what I have into my bike. That's including a $300 charger. It's including a $700 battery. You can do a bike more or less like mine, maybe not all the accessories, but just the kit and the bike you can do for like $1,000, you know? So that being said, that's why I think hub motors are best for commuting, because you're doing it for two reasons. One, maybe you're just sick of traffic, you're trying to get out of, trying to get on the bike, trying to, figure out a different way of doing it. That's great, but also, you have to think about places you're going to go. Are you going to always be able to lock up your bike? Are you going to be able to bring it into your office? Are you planning on going complete car replacement? And where are you going to? Are you going, to stores a lot? Are you going to be leaving outside a lot? Are you really going to ride a $7,000 mountain bike and park it downtown when you go have drinks? Probably not. So keeping your bike more chill is better, in my opinion, making it look more like a regular bike. And that's, one thing that somebody would say about a mid-drive system is that it doesn't really look anything like a different bike. But again, it comes down to cost. You are spending quite a bit more in potentially running into issues, having more mechanical things to worry about. And yeah, they're not really, that much more efficient in terms of climbing and all that. I mean, you're not going to be climbing 10, 12, 20% grades, all day long. I mean, most people live in flatland. I live in probably one of the most hilly places you can think of. And I traverse the entire town. And I never ever shift down. I never ever overheat my motor. It doesn't matter if it's like, 90 degrees out or whatever. It's totally fine. I mean, granted, I have my controller out in the open and my hub is open, but I haven't had to worry about that at all. So yeah, that's basically what I have to say about this whole topic. If you're looking at, building a bike, obviously, Bosch, Yamaha, Bionics, way overkill. Probably can't put it on your bike anyway. If you're looking at Bafang, I believe that they have some work to do still. Oh, and I guess I'll mention this too. So one of the other things that Fool mentioned was weight. Where is it? Heavy and uneven weight. Okay, so my motor is probably about 10 to 12 pounds maybe. And the BBS HD, which is another 1,000-watt kit, basically equaling the same amount of power output as mine, it comes in at like 13 pounds. So it's not any lighter. And if any, I mean, yeah, it is evenly distributed, meaning that it's at the bottom of the bottom bracket. That's great. But in terms of commuting, it really isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. The change that I would make if you were looking at, building a bike and you wanted to model it after mine, is to not get a battery in a bag, even though it is a little bit cheaper and you have more options. They make ones that go on the bottle cage. You can find them. They see them everywhere. They just mount right to the bottle cage, and they're lockable. You can take them off. They're waterproof. Way easier to manage, I think. But yeah, that's basically all I have on that topic. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. You're more than welcome to share your own opinion. I welcome any comments or, criticisms. This is just, my own personal take on the subject, being that I have gone most of the last 2.5 years by e-bike. It's definitely a car replacement vehicle. I don't drive my car anymore. I've only ridden the bus a few times this last year in the wintertime when it was snowing and icy and stuff. So I think, I have a little bit of experience in that. And lastly, before I go, is this guy here, Justin Lemire Elmore. He is the founder of Grin Technologies, and he is, I don't know, in my opinion, he's the guy that's doing the most innovative work in terms of DIY stuff. And he has his shop here, ebikes.ca. And if you look at his shop, conversion kits. More or less what he sells, what they sell, are direct drive kits. You have 9 Continent, you have Crystal Light. Those are your main big ones in terms of, the actual like big hub motors. And the 9 Continent motor is basically the exact same thing as my motor. If you look at it, like that one and this one, they are almost identical. Is it worth the upgrade? Who knows? I guess we'll find out in my next video because I'm about to make one. And he's got his controllers here listed. They just came out with where are we at? Their new controllers, which are based off of the Infineon controllers. They're a lot smaller. They're way smaller than mine, but they put out, they're way more efficient, and they're sine wave, so they're really quiet too. So that's kind of cool. The motors are already super quiet. So then, let's see. I guess one last thing I should talk about is direct drive versus geared hub motors, because that'll be the other thing that you run into if you've taken my advice and gone with a hub motor. Should I choose direct drive or geared? In my opinion, direct drive is still the best way to go, and geared is going to be lighter, but it has the planary gears in there, which are nylon the most part, and they're going to wear out as well. And you can replace them with like the metal ones, but then it's louder. So again, direct drive is the most simple. It's the most easily obtainable. They've been making these by the thousands and thousands already. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like hub motors are already like pretty perfect in my opinion. The advancements that they're making are more or less just like little, better wiring or, better laminations, or, now people are putting like, coolant in there to keep them cool. But you got to remember all these are kind of geared towards people that are putting these like really high powered motors on their bikes, and they're trying to go, racing or 50 miles an hour or whatever else. Commuter bikes, stock kit, nothing special, eBay $225, totally awesome. 9 Continent is probably my choice if I were to upgrade to a better motor. I'd go with 9 Continent rear hub. And then lastly, front hub versus rear hub. No contest, always rear hub, except if you're working with a bike like a cruiser bike or single speed or something like that, where it just doesn't make sense to try to fit one on the back, then go front hub. But you're going to want to go less voltage, smaller. It's not going to be nearly as stable and strong and weight balanced, and it's easy for the front wheel to slip out, and just got to be more careful. It's easier. It's definitely the easiest. And if you watch this video by Justin, or it's actually by Court from Electric Bike Review, but Justin's got a front hub, and so it obviously has its place in the world, but rear hubs are definitely better in my opinion, for all around use. So anyway, there's my 30 minutes on e-bike motor kits and what I think. Leave any comments if you have anything else to add. Cheers.